What if I told you that some of the most stunning, expensive, and beautifully animated movies ever made were also colossal failures? Hollywood doesn't just crown winners, it buries dreamers. Behind every talking animal and twinkling spaceship lies a forgotten story of broken budgets, bad timing, and brilliance the box office never noticed. So, grab your popcorn, because we're diving into 20 cartoon movies that didn't just flop. They crashed, burned, and somehow became legends. Treasure Planet. Picture this, it's 2002, and Disney wants to change the game. They take Treasure Island, that classic seafaring adventure, and blast it into outer space. Glimmering planets, flying galleons, a cyborg pirate, and a rebellious teen navigating a galaxy of gold. Treasure Planet was supposed to be Disney's next masterpiece, its boldest, most expensive animated film yet. It wasn't just a movie, it was a dream 2 decades in the making. Directors Ron Clements and John Musker, the genius duo behind Aladdin and The Little Mermaid, had pitched it to Disney years earlier. They wanted to combine the wonder of sci-fi with the heart of a timeless adventure story, and Disney finally said yes, handing them a staggering $140 million to make it real. The result? A visual marvel. Hand-drawn art fused with early 3D animation to create glowing galaxies and shimmering solar sails. Critics were dazzled. Roger Ebert called it a wonderful adventure. But when the opening weekend came silence, did you know Treasure Planet earned just $38 million in the US? Even globally, it couldn't scrape back half its budget. Released between Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets and The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, it never stood a chance. Families were already booked solid at the box office. Disney had aimed for the stars and crashed into the void. The film's failure didn't just hurt, it changed animation history. After Treasure Planet, Disney all but abandoned hand-drawn animation in favor of CGI, leaving traditional artists adrift. Yet years later, Treasure Planet became something else. A cult legend. Fans rediscovered it, celebrated its imagination, its emotion, its artistry. It's now hailed as one of Disney's most underrated films. A bomb in 2002, a masterpiece in hindsight. That's Hollywood irony at its best. Titan AE. Before Avatar, before Interstellar, there was Titan AE, a breathtaking space epic that nobody saw. Released in 2000, it was Fox Animation Studios' big gamble, an original sci-fi adventure with hand-drawn characters flying through dazzling digital galaxies. It looked incredible, it sounded epic, and it nearly destroyed an entire studio. The setup was bold. Earth destroyed, humanity scattered, and one young man, voiced by Matt Damon, holding the key to mankind's survival. With co-stars Drew Barrymore, Nathan Lane, and Ron Perlman, it had everything a summer blockbuster needed, except luck. Did you know Fox spent nearly $75 million on production and another $30 million on marketing? That's over $100 million for a studio still trying to catch Disney and DreamWorks. But the timing couldn't have been worse. By 2000, family audiences wanted laughs, not dystopian sci-fi. And when Titan AE hit theaters, it was crushed between Chicken Run and The Patriot. Its opening weekend barely scraped $9 million. Within weeks, Fox pulled it from theaters. The studio lost an estimated $100 million, and just days later, Fox Animation Studios shut down entirely. One movie, one spectacular implosion. But here's the twist. Titan AE wasn't bad. In fact, it was visionary. Directors Don Bluth and Gary Goldman pushed animation further than ever before, merging 2D characters with 3D backdrops years before Pixar perfected the blend. Its soundtrack rocked, its world building was rich, its tone, dark, daring, and emotional, was something animation rarely dared to try. 2 decades later, it's found redemption as a cult favorite. Fans hail it as a lost masterpiece that was simply born too early. Fox wanted to make Star Wars for a new generation. Instead, they made a legend that no one saw, until it was too late. The Iron Giant. Imagine an animated movie with heart, soul, and a giant robot that could make even adults cry. Sounds like a hit, right? But in 1999, The Iron Giant did the impossible. It flopped. Warner Brothers had high hopes, directed by a then-unknown Brad Bird, who would later go on to make The Incredibles. The Iron Giant was crafted as a love letter to Cold War sci-fi. A boy meets a robot from outer space, teaches it about life, and together they face the fear of a world obsessed with destruction. It was emotional. It was poetic. It was everything animation could be when it reached beyond fairy tales. But here's the tragedy. Warner Brothers barely marketed it. No toy lines, no fast food tie-ins, no billboards. The studio had lost faith after several earlier animated disappointments and quietly released the film without fanfare. It was like whispering in a hurricane. Did you know The Iron Giant opened the same week as The Sixth Sense and The Blair Witch Project? Two pop culture juggernauts that left no oxygen for anything else. The Iron Giant earned just $23 million on a $70 million budget, a disaster on paper. But years later, word spread. Critics hailed it as a masterpiece. Audiences rediscovered it on VHS, then DVD. Suddenly, this forgotten film became a cult phenomenon. Its themes of empathy, fear, and sacrifice resonated deeply with new generations. And today, The Iron Giant isn't just loved, it's legendary. The bomb became one of animation's purest triumphs. Brad Bird said it best, "You are who you choose to be." And somehow, this little movie chose to be unforgettable. The Lost Empire. By 2001, Disney wanted to grow up. The studio that had given the world The Little Mermaid and Beauty and the Beast decided to dive deep, literally, into a bold new world. Atlantis. The Lost Empire was Disney's attempt to make an animated adventure for an older audience. No songs, no talking animals, just ancient myths, diesel-powered submarines, and breathtaking steampunk cities. It sounded daring. It was daring. But it also sank faster than its submarine hero. Disney poured over $120 million into Atlantis, assembling a powerhouse team. Directors Gary Trousdale and Kirk Wise, Beauty and the Beast, writer Joss Whedon, and producer Don Hahn. The animation was stunning, the world-building rich. It even introduced a new visual style inspired by comic book artist Mike Mignola, Hellboy. So what went wrong? Timing, always timing. Did you know Atlantis opened just weeks after Shrek? DreamWorks' snarky, self-aware comedy redefined what audiences wanted from animation. Funny, irreverent, and packed with pop culture punchlines. Atlantis, by contrast, was serious, dark, and old-fashioned. The kids didn't connect, and the adults didn't show up. The result? A global gross of just $186 million, barely breaking even after marketing. For Disney, it was a heartbreak. They'd tried to reinvent themselves, and audiences said no. But here's the kicker. Years later, Atlantis found redemption. Fans praised its ambitious design, diverse characters, and mature storytelling. It became a cult favorite, especially among viewers tired of formulaic fairy tales. In the end, Atlantis wasn't a failure of imagination. It was a failure of timing. Disney set out to find a lost city. Instead, they found something else. A reminder that even in animation, risk doesn't always pay, but it always makes history. Sinbad, Legend of the Seven Seas. By 2003, DreamWorks had become Disney's biggest rival. After Shrek's runaway success, the studio set its sights on something epic, ancient myths, sweeping oceans, and adventure on a grand scale. The result was Sinbad, Legend of the Seven Seas, a lavish, hand-drawn animated spectacle starring the voices of Brad Pitt, Catherine Zeta-Jones, and Michelle Pfeiffer. It had everything: action, comedy, a hint of romance, and a story pulled straight from classic legends. It should have been a hit, but it wasn't even close. DreamWorks spent around $60 million producing Sinbad and another $30 million marketing it. But when it sailed into theaters, it barely made $80 million worldwide, far below expectations. It wasn't just a disappointment. It was the final nail in the coffin for traditional hand-drawn animation at DreamWorks. So, what happened? Timing, once again. Did you know Sinbad premiered just weeks after Pixar's Finding Nemo? That's right, the little clownfish that could crush the mythic sailor at the box office. Families flocked to Nemo's heartwarming underwater world, leaving Sinbad's swashbuckling adventure stranded. The irony? Critics didn't hate Sinbad. Many praised its artistry and Michelle Pfeiffer's stunning performance as the goddess Eris. But audiences were shifting. Computer animation was new, shiny, and thrilling. Hand-drawn films suddenly felt like relics. For DreamWorks, the loss was massive. They shut down their traditional animation division and doubled down on CGI. The age of digital animation had officially begun, and Sinbad was its final casualty. And yet, 2 decades later, fans have rediscovered it. The animation holds up. The story still shines. It may have sunk at the box office, but it sailed triumphantly into cult classic territory. Sinbad, Legend of the Seven Seas, didn't fail because it lacked heart. It failed because it was a hand-drawn epic released in a CGI world. The Road to El Dorado. Before Sinbad, DreamWorks had already gambled on another high-priced adventure, The Road to El Dorado. Released in 2000, it was a buddy comedy musical set in the mythical city of gold. On paper, it sounded like a sure thing. Lush animation, a clever script, and music by Elton John. How could it lose? It turns out even gold can sink. DreamWorks spent over $90 million crafting El Dorado, hoping to rival Disney's musicals of the 90s. The animation was stunning, the voice cast stacked with charmers like Kevin Kline and Kenneth Branagh. It had humor, adventure, and a catchy soundtrack that screamed instant classic. But something didn't click. Did you know El Dorado opened the same weekend as Erin Brockovich and Final Destination? The adult audiences went serious, the teens went scary, and families went elsewhere. The film earned just $76 million worldwide, not even covering production costs. The problem wasn't just timing, it was a tone. The Road to El Dorado couldn't decide what it wanted to be. Was it a kids' movie, a grown-up comedy, a musical, a satire? It was all of them and none of them. Audiences were confused, critics shrugged, and DreamWorks' Golden Road turned into a dead end. But like many flops, this one aged like fine wine. Fans later celebrated it for its humor, gorgeous art, and the undeniable chemistry between its leads. On social media, El Dorado has become a cult favorite, memed, quoted, and adored by those who discovered it long after its theatrical run. DreamWorks wanted to strike gold. They didn't. But in trying, they created something that glitters all the same, a misunderstood gem buried beneath bigger hits. Sometimes the treasure isn't the success, it's the story of the failure itself. Osmosis Jones. Only in early 2000s Hollywood could someone greenlight a buddy cop comedy set inside the human body. Osmosis Jones was half live action, half animation, and all chaos. Released in 2001 by Warner Brothers, it told the story of a white blood cell cop, voiced by Chris Rock, and a cold pill, David Hyde Pierce, teaming up to save their host, a zookeeper played by Bill Murray, from a deadly virus. On paper, it sounded like Men in Black meets Fantastic Voyage. In reality, it was a medical meltdown. The animation, directed by the Farrelly brothers, the minds behind There's Something About Mary, was energetic, colorful, and weirdly brilliant. The world inside the body was a bustling city, veins as highways, stomach acid as subways. But the live-action segments? Let's just say audiences weren't ready to see Bill Murray as a man losing a battle with his own hygiene. Did you know Warner Brothers spent over $70 million producing Osmosis Jones and another $30 million marketing it? That's $100 million for a movie that made just $14 million in the US. It wasn't just a flop, it was a studio embarrassment. The issue wasn't creativity, it was confusion. Who was this movie for? Kids were grossed out, adults didn't get the humor, and the blend of animation and live action, while ambitious, never quite clicked. After its failure, Warner Brothers scrapped plans for more animated features and pivoted back to safer bets. But here's the twist. Osmosis Jones didn't die completely. It found a weird second life on TV as Ozzy and Drix, an animated spin-off that ran for 2 seasons. Today, it's remembered as one of the strangest flops ever, a movie too weird to live, too creative to forget. Osmosis Jones was proof that in Hollywood, innovation doesn't always mean success. Sometimes it just means you were ahead of your time, way too far ahead. Strange magic. When George Lucas makes an animated musical, you'd think it's an instant hit, right? Not this time. Strange Magic 2015 was the film that nobody asked for and barely anyone saw. Billed as a fairy tale fantasy, inspired by Shakespeare's A Midsummer Night's Dream, it featured goblins, elves, and a jukebox of pop songs spanning 4 decades. Sounds fun until you realize Lucas spent 15 years developing it. That's right, 15. By the time Strange Magic finally hit theaters, Lucasfilm had already been sold to Disney, and audiences were more interested in Star Wars, The Force Awakens. This forgotten passion project limped into cinemas with almost no promotion. Did you know it cost around $100 million to make and earned just $13 million worldwide? Critics called it bewildering, overstuffed, and the longest 99 minutes in animation. The visuals were decent, but the story felt like a karaoke night gone wrong. Pop hits dropped into fairyland with no rhyme or rhythm. But here's where it gets interesting. Lucas himself claimed the movie was about love for everyone, a heartfelt theme buried under layers of glitter and noise. His intention was sweet. The execution? Not so much. Audiences didn't know what to make of it. Was it a kids' movie? A musical parody? A fantasy epic? It was everything at once, and nothing that worked. Within weeks, Strange Magic vanished from theaters, barely making a blip on the cultural radar. Today, it stands as one of Lucasfilm's biggest oddities, a wildly ambitious failure that proves even legends can miss the mark. In Hollywood, they say every genius gets one misfire. For George Lucas, this was it. A beautiful, bewildering mess wrapped in fairy wings. Mars Needs Moms. If there's one title that still haunts Disney's accountants, it's Mars Needs Moms. Released in 2011, this motion capture sci-fi adventure was meant to be groundbreaking. Instead, it became one of the biggest financial flops in Hollywood history. The film told the story of a boy whose mother gets taken by Martians and his desperate mission to bring her home. Simple, emotional, and family-friendly. Or so Disney thought, but something about it just didn't work. Produced by Robert Zemeckis, the same visionary behind the Polar Express, the movie used advanced performance capture technology. Actors wore digital suits to record every expression, every movement. It was supposed to create realism, but instead, it created something else, the uncanny valley. Did you know Mars Needs Moms cost around $150 million to make, plus another $50 million in marketing? That's a $200 million bet. And when the dust settled, it made just $39 million worldwide. Audiences found the characters unsettling, the tone strange, and the story oddly joyless for a Disney adventure. It wasn't bad. It just felt off, like an experiment that forgot to be fun. The disaster didn't just end one movie. It ended an era. Disney shut down Zemeckis' Image Movers digital studio soon after, canceling several planned projects. Motion capture animation was declared too cold, and Disney pivoted back to the warmth of traditional CGI with films like Tangled and Frozen. Years later, Mars Needs Moms has found a small fanbase who admire its technical ambition and emotional core, but its reputation remains sealed. The movie that cost a fortune and broke the mold in all the wrong ways. Sometimes, even the biggest studios forget the golden rule. All the tech in the world means nothing if your story doesn't connect. Stallion of the Cimarron, DreamWorks had heart, horsepower, and Hans Zimmer. Spirit. Stallion of the Cimarron was supposed to be their next great animated triumph. Released in 2002, it told the story of a wild Mustang's fight for freedom on the American frontier. No talking animals, no pop culture jokes, just sweeping landscapes, emotional music, and stunning animation. It was gorgeous, it was noble, and it was, financially speaking, a quiet disappointment. Did you know DreamWorks spent about $80 million on Spirit, only to make $122 million worldwide? It wasn't a total loss, but after marketing, the profits evaporated. Critics praised its artistry, but audiences were unsure. In an era dominated by talking animals and jokes, a near-wordless horse story felt out of place. The film's animation style was a hybrid of hand-drawn and computer-generated imagery, an ambitious experiment. Add in Bryan Adams' heartfelt songs and Hans Zimmer's sweeping score, and you had something closer to a Western epic than a kid's cartoon. But in 2002, Quiet and Poetic didn't sell tickets. Families wanted laughs, not longing stares across the prairie. Despite its lukewarm box office, Spirit became beloved over time. Its message about freedom and resilience struck a chord, and in 2021, it even got a reboot, Spirit Untamed. The new version didn't capture the same magic, but it proved one thing: Spirit never truly faded. DreamWorks may have lost money, but they created something timeless. Sometimes failure doesn't mean forgotten, it just means misunderstood. Spirit, Stallion of the Cimarron may have stumbled at the box office, but artistically, it ran free. Delgo. You probably haven't seen Delgo. Most people haven't. In fact, it's one of the biggest box office failures in animation history, and that's saying something. Released in 2008, Delgo was an independent animated film that tried to compete with the giants, Disney, DreamWorks, Pixar, on their own turf. It had an A-list cast: Freddie Prinze Jr., Jennifer Love Hewitt, Anne Bancroft, and Val Kilmer. It had a sprawling fantasy world with dragons, kingdoms, and epic battles. What it didn't have was luck. Did you know Delgo grossed just $694,000 in its opening weekend, despite playing in over 2,000 theaters? That's less than the price of lunch for a studio blockbuster. The film had been in development for nearly a decade, a passion project from a small team determined to show that indie animation could shine. But by the time it hit theaters, the animation looked outdated, the marketing was nearly non-existent, and audiences had no idea it even existed. The reviews were brutal. Critics called it confusing, stiff, and painfully overambitious. But the real story of Delgo isn't failure, it's heartbreak. The team behind it genuinely believed they could rival the majors through creativity and persistence. They weren't wrong to dream, they just didn't have the resources to match it. Delgo became an industry cautionary tale, a reminder that in Hollywood, vision alone isn't enough. Without distribution, timing, and marketing, even the most passionate art can vanish into obscurity. Today, it's a curiosity, occasionally rediscovered by animation fans who marvel at its ambition. A film that reached for the skies and fell through the cracks. Sometimes, the saddest bombs are the ones that tried the hardest. The Good Dinosaur. When Pixar misses, it's rare. But The Good Dinosaur, 2015, stands as one of the few times the studio stumbled. Not for lack of effort, but because of too much of it. This film had everything on paper: a prehistoric setting, a heartwarming story, stunning visuals, and the Pixar name. But behind the scenes, chaos ruled. Did you know The Good Dinosaur went through almost an entire reboot mid-production? Directors were replaced, storylines rewritten, characters redesigned, years of work were scrapped. Pixar even shifted release dates multiple times to rebuild the film from the ground up. The story they settled on was simple but emotional. An anxious young dinosaur befriends a human boy in a wild, untamed world. The visuals were jaw-dropping, hyper-realistic landscapes that looked almost live action. But the heart of the movie never quite found its rhythm. When it finally premiered, audiences were polite but not passionate. It grossed $333 million worldwide. Not terrible, but for Pixar, that was below expectations. The film had cost around $200 million to make, plus massive marketing expenses. It barely broke even. Critics called it beautiful but hollow. Families called it good, not great. And Pixar, known for storytelling perfection, took a rare moment of humility. But here's the twist. In time, The Good Dinosaur found its defenders. Some saw it as one of Pixar's most visually poetic works, a gentle fable about fear, courage, and finding your way home. It may not have roared like Toy Story or soared like Up, but it had something rare: sincerity. The Good Dinosaur wasn't bad, it was just lost, like its hero wandering through the wilderness, unsure where it fit. And maybe that's why, even in failure, it still leaves a footprint. Rock-a-Doodle. Only in the early 1990s could someone think, let's make an Elvis Presley rooster save the world. And only the fearless animator Don Bluth could pull it off, or try to. Rock-a-Doodle, 1991, was a musical, a fantasy, and a surreal comedy rolled into one. It was bold, bizarre, and a box office flop of feathered proportions. Bluth was already animation royalty by then. He'd given audiences The Secret of NIMH, An American Tail, and The Land Before Time. But with Rock-a-Doodle, he wanted to go bigger, wilder, weirder. Inspired by a French play, it told the story of Chanticleer, a rooster whose crow brings up the sun, until one day, the sun rises without him, and he's driven from the farm. Think The Lion King meets Las Vegas. It was colorful chaos. A live-action boy gets turned into a cartoon kitten, the farm animals sing and dance, and a rock-and-roll rooster, voiced by Glenn Campbell, tries to bring light back to the world. The problem? Nobody knew who the movie was for. Kids were confused, adults were baffled, and critics had no idea what to make of it. The tone swung from slapstick to dramatic to downright strange. Did you know it cost around $18 million to make but earned only $11 million worldwide? For an independent studio like Bluth's, that was devastating. The film's distributor, MGM, gave it a small release and audiences just didn't show. Yet, for all its flaws, Rock-a-Doodle has that unmistakable Don Bluth magic: hand-drawn artistry, wild imagination, and heart. Over time, it's become a curiosity for animation lovers, a reminder of an era when filmmakers dared to be different even when it didn't pay off. In the end, Chanticleer may have failed to wake the sun, but Bluth's courage to dream big kept animation's fire burning. Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within. In 2001, Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within promised to change cinema forever. It was the first photorealistic computer-animated feature film, years before technology was truly ready. The creators called it the future of filmmaking. The box office called it a $100 million mistake. Based loosely on the Final Fantasy video game series, the movie was a massive collaboration between Square Pictures and Columbia. The goal, blend the visual precision of video games with the emotional depth of live-action storytelling. The results were astonishingly lifelike. So realistic, they coined a new term, digital actors. The story followed scientist Aki Ross, humanity's last hope against ghostly alien creatures invading Earth. It was ambitious, cerebral, and visually stunning, but emotionally cold. Audiences expecting an action-packed adventure instead got a slow, philosophical meditation on life, death, and spirit energy. Did you know The Spirits Within cost over $130 million to produce and made only $85 million worldwide? It didn't just underperform, it annihilated its creators. The failure forced Square to shut down its animation studio and merge with rival Enix just to stay afloat. But here's the twist. In hindsight, the movie was ahead of its time. Its digital artistry inspired the next generation of CGI filmmaking. Films like Avatar and The Polar Express owe a quiet debt to their boldness. Aki Ross, the film's digital heroine, even made Maxim magazine's Hottest 100 Women list, a bizarre footnote in Hollywood history for a character who didn't actually exist. Today, The Spirits Within is seen as a noble failure, a beautiful experiment that reached for the future too soon. Sometimes, innovation is just another word for heartbreak. The Black Cauldron. Long before The Lion King roared and Aladdin dazzled, Disney faced a shadow it almost couldn't escape, The Black Cauldron. Released in 1985, it was supposed to be Disney's grand return to epic storytelling. Instead, it nearly ended the studio's animation department. For decades, Disney had been synonymous with light and laughter. But by the 1980s, the magic had dimmed. The company wanted something bold, something darker, an animated fantasy to rival Star Wars and The Lord of the Rings. So they adapted Lloyd Alexander's Chronicles of Prydain, filled with wizards, warriors, and an undead army led by the terrifying Horned King. It was gorgeous, ambitious, and, for Disney, shockingly grim. Did you know The Black Cauldron was the first Disney film to receive a PG rating? It was also the first to experiment with computer-generated imagery, but the darkness proved too much. Test audiences were frightened, executives panicked, and last-minute edits chopped out entire scenes. The result was uneven, a haunting fairy tale trapped inside a children's movie, and audiences didn't bite. On a $44 million budget, The Black Cauldron made just $21 million domestically. It was a disaster. Disney's animation division teetered on the edge of closure. Some insiders called it the end of Disney magic, but fate had other plans. The failure forced Disney to reinvent itself. Within a few years, new leadership, including a young animator named Tim Burton and producers like Jeffrey Katzenberg, would help spark The Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, and The Lion King. In other words, The Black Cauldron had to fail so Disney could rise again. Dark, daring, and misunderstood, it's the movie that almost killed the kingdom and accidentally saved it. Home on the Range. If The Black Cauldron nearly buried Disney's golden age, Home on the Range came close to burying its hand-drawn legacy. Released in 2004, this talking cow western was meant to be a farewell to traditional animation. Instead, it was an awkward stumble out the door. The premise was simple. 3 dairy cows set out to save their farm by capturing a notorious cattle rustler. It was colorful, comedic, and filled with catchy songs. But audiences weren't exactly moved. Did you know Home on the Range cost around $110 million to make and earned just $145 million worldwide? For Disney, that was barely breaking even after marketing. It wasn't a total bomb, but for a studio that built its empire on animation, it felt like a creative crisis. The bigger problem wasn't the box office, it was the context. Just 1 year earlier, Pixar had released Finding Nemo, and DreamWorks had Shrek 2 on deck. CGI was the future, and Home on the Range looked like a relic from the past. Critics called it cute but uninspired. Audiences found it forgettable. Even Disney's own executives seemed ready to move on. The film became the final traditionally animated feature before the studio officially switched to full CGI with Chicken Little. Ironically, Home on the Range wasn't a bad movie, it just arrived in the wrong era. Its hand-drawn charm and Western humor have earned it a small cult following among animation purists who miss the simplicity of Disney's 2D days. It's a strange legacy, a film about saving a home that couldn't save its own art form. Disney closed the book on hand-drawn animation. Cats Don't Dance. In 1997, Cats Don't Dance should have been a celebration. A musical love letter to old Hollywood, complete with toe-tapping tunes, dazzling choreography, and talking animals chasing fame under the California sun. Instead, it was one of the most charming flops in animation history. Produced by Turner Feature Animation, Cats Don't Dance told the story of Danny, a wide-eyed cat from Kokomo who dreams of becoming a movie star in a world where animals are typecast as sidekicks. It's clever, funny, and bursting with heart, a backstage satire about Hollywood's golden age, told through the eyes of the overlooked. Sounds perfect, right? So what went wrong? Timing. Did you know Cats Don't Dance hit theaters just as Turner Animation merged with Warner Brothers? The film got lost in corporate shuffle chaos. Marketing was slashed, promotion was minimal, and it opened against heavy competition. It earned a mere $3.5 million at the box office, on a $32 million budget. Critics loved it. Audiences who saw it adored it, but almost no one knew it existed. Directed by Mark Dindal, who'd later helmed Disney's The Emperor's New Groove, the movie was fast, funny, and full of jazzy energy. It even won the very first Annie Award for Best Animated Feature, years before the category existed at the Oscars. In hindsight, Cats Don't Dance was a victim of transition. 2D animation was fading, and studios were shifting toward digital futures. But for those who discovered it later, on VHS, cable, or online, it became a cult gem. It's ironic. A movie about underdog performers ignored by Hollywood became exactly that. Sometimes the best performers don't need applause, they just keep dancing anyway. The Pagemaster, half live action, half animation, and all confusion, The Pagemaster, 1994, was supposed to be every child's dream. A magical adventure through the world of books starring Macaulay Culkin at the height of his fame. Instead, it became a cautionary tale about overcomplicating simple magic. The idea was brilliant. A timid boy enters a library, gets swept into a world of living literature, and must face his fears through classic tales like Treasure Island and Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It's a celebration of imagination, courage, and the power of stories. But the execution? Messy. Did you know The Pagemaster cost nearly $35 million, a fortune for a hybrid film in the early 90s, and earned just $13 million domestically? Critics said it lacked focus, and even young audiences found it oddly flat. The animation was lush, the message was pure, but the tone shifted constantly. Too dark for little kids, too soft for adults. And while Culkin was Hollywood's golden boy after Home Alone, even his star power couldn't save a movie that didn't quite know what it wanted to be. Part of the problem was marketing. Studios didn't know how to sell a half-animated movie in the post-Roger Rabbit era. It was too niche for a blockbuster and too expensive for an indie. Yet, like many flops, The Pagemaster grew a quiet legacy. For kids who saw it in the 90s, it became a nostalgic memory, a gateway to classic literature wrapped in whimsical adventure. The irony? A movie about rediscovering forgotten stories became one itself. Sometimes the most poetic endings aren't written by authors, they're written by time. The Emoji Movie. There are flops, and then there are legends of failure. The Emoji Movie, 2017, sits comfortably in that second category. It's the film that made audiences ask, was this really made from phone icons? In an age when Hollywood was turning everything into a franchise, board games, toys, even theme parks, Sony Pictures tried something truly digital, an animated comedy set inside a smartphone. The emojis were alive, each with its own personality, dreams, and existential crises. Gene, the meh emoji who wanted to be more expressive, was supposed to represent individuality in a world obsessed with sameness. It sounded clever on paper, a comment on modern communication wrapped in family-friendly fun. Instead, it became a cautionary tale of what happens when marketing makes the movie. Did you know The Emoji Movie was produced for around $50 million and grossed over $200 million worldwide? Technically a hit? Yet it was so critically despised that it won multiple Golden Raspberry Awards, including Worst Picture. Critics called it an ad in search of a story, and audiences laughed at it, not with it. But here's the fascinating part. It's not the worst idea Hollywood ever had. It's the most revealing. The Emoji Movie is a mirror of its time, when studios chased algorithms instead of imagination, hoping to turn digital trends into gold. Ironically, that cynicism made it unforgettable. Kids watched it once, critics mocked it forever, and the internet turned it into a meme factory. The movie that tried to speak for everyone ended up saying everything about Hollywood instead. Sometimes a flop doesn't fade, it just becomes legend. Planes, Fire and Rescue. By 2014, Disney's Cars universe was running on fumes. Yet someone said, what if we make a spin-off about airplanes? And so, Planes took flight, a modest hit that earned enough to spark a sequel, Planes, Fire and Rescue. On paper, it made sense. The first film's hero, Dusty Crophopper, returns, this time joining an aerial firefighting team to protect a national park. The animation was bright, the message wholesome, the cast stacked with familiar voices. Everything about it screamed safe bet. But safety rarely soars. Did you know Planes, Fire and Rescue cost about $50 million to make and pulled in around $150 million worldwide? That's decent, but nowhere near Pixar or Disney animation standards. The problem wasn't money, it was fatigue. By 2014, audiences had seen one too many talking vehicles. Critics called it pleasant but pointless. Kids liked the action. Adults barely noticed. Even Disney seemed half-hearted about it. The marketing was quieter, the merchandise modest. It was as if the studio knew this franchise had reached its runway's end. Still, there's something quietly admirable about it. The movie honored real-life firefighters and had moments of genuine warmth. It wasn't bad, it was just unneeded. When the dust settled, Disney parked the Planes franchise for good. The skies went silent, and CGI-fueled spin-offs took a backseat to original storytelling again. Planes, Fire and Rescue didn't crash, it simply ran out of airspeed. And that, perhaps, is the softest kind of Hollywood ending. A film that lands safely, only to be forgotten moments later. So, there they are. 20 animated dreams that crashed, burned, and somehow became unforgettable. From Treasure Planet to the Emoji Movie, each one is a reminder that even in failure, Hollywood still finds magic in the wreckage. Maybe that's the real story. Every flop is just a legend waiting to be rediscovered. Which of these animated disasters surprised you the most? Drop your thoughts below, hit that like button, and subscribe because in this town, even the box office ghosts have stories left to tell.